Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Utterly Understandable. I'm joined again by Hamish Keston. Hamish, there's a lot of talk about dairy planning functions, what they do, how businesses use them. But one thing that perhaps isn't discussed as much, but is possibly, the most important aspect of all, is where should the planning function sit? Given your background in optimization, where do you think the planning function should sit in a dairy business?
Yeah, no, great question again, Robbie. So look, there's a number of factors to consider, but ultimately it's about where would create the most value for the business. So just before we kind of get into that, I'd separate planning function into I guess two distinct bits. There's a bit that can capture value, and then there's a bit that's all about execution. So when I talk about value capture, what I mean is the decision-making process around the product mix that then determines what revenue you can capture for the business. And execution is everything after that, such as production, scheduling, logistics, milk transport, etc. So those I distinguish those two, and what I'm going to talk about is where you should put the value capture piece from my experience. Before we get into that, I just want to recall or relate a rule of thumb that's quite a useful one that an old colleague of mine shared with me. And so essentially what it is revenue is in the thousands, manufacturing costs are in the hundreds, and logistics, i.e. storage and distribution, are in the tens. So why am I sharing this? Well, if you actually go and look at this and look at the P&L of the business, as I did one day when I was bored, you'll see that this rule of thumb actually holds true. So your biggest lever for value is the revenue side of things, and that should be the overriding driver, like meeting customer demand for the products that give you the greatest profitability. The cost from a manufacturing and logistics perspective are orders of magnitude less than the revenue. So that's why I'm comfortable separating the value capture piece of planning from the executional plan part of planning. So the second concept that I want to talk about that I think is important is about having healthy tension in the business that drives value. And what this means is sorry, just take a step back. So when I say healthy tension, so typically the manufacturing part of it and supply chain part of the business is focused around minimizing cost and maximizing die flow. They typically don't like complexity and hard to make products. Whereas from a value capture perspective, you want to make the most profitable products, and they're often the ones that are harder to make. Might require shorter production lengths and things like that. So if you put that value capture in the same function as manufacturing supply chain, there's the potential that they'll actually optimize to minimize cost and make their lives easier, as opposed to optimizing to maximize value. So by separating those two and having your executional planning function sitting alongside operations and supply chain from the value capture part of the business, you create a healthy business tension there that then results in the business chasing the greatest value for its stakeholders. So what this means is that, your planning and optimization function that's chasing value, in my view, should be separate from supply chain and manufacturing. So where do you put it? So I've seen it work well within the sales function. It's by being within the sales function, it's close to the customer. But there's a number of other alternatives, such as having it sitting in part of the office of the CFO, or reporting directly to the CEO as a profit-generating SBU. And like the ultimate kind of end state, and I'm working on a white paper around this at the moment, is it becomes a business function that people refer to as central portfolio management, and it's a profit generating SBU that would report directly into the CEO. So that's my kind of quick sort of 5 cents on where the planning function should be. So thanks everyone.
No, Excellent, Hamish, as always, and I couldn't have said it any better myself. I think one big thing to note here is planning is a very evolutionary process, and it takes years and years and years to get right. It is a journey.
And you never get it.
It is something. Yeah, it can always be improved upon. And kind of with that in mind, Hamish, like you said, is writing a white paper on the subject. So keep your eyes open for that coming soon. But thank you again for your time, Hamish, and thank you all for joining us on another episode of Utterly Understandable. We look forward to seeing you in the next week.